right, everybody. Welcome to another special episode of the Reformark Media Show. Today we've got a guest with us, Dr. Rigney. Thank you, Dr. Rigney, for coming on, and we really appreciate you taking the time today. How's the weather in Moscow this morning?
Oh, it's great. October's nice and cool, but not crazy cold. So it's a great time of year.
That's about how it is here too. We actually live in very similar areas, just on different parts of the
Uh-huh.
United States. Have you heard of Stanton, Virginia, before?
No, I haven't, but I can imagine that it would be similar. You're farther south, but climate might be the same.
Yeah, even our city is it's set up a lot like Moscow is
Oh,
too.
okay.
So it's funny how similar the area is over here. We have like 25,000 and
Yep. Yeah.
we're like 30 minutes from James Madison University in Harrisonburg. I think you were at Grimke not that long ago. We're like an hour and a half from Grimke,
Okay.
so we're in the middle of the Shenandoah Valley. But
Nice.
I'll go ahead and start us off with your bio and then get you to open us up in prayer, if that sounds good.
Yeah.
Today's guest is someone who isn't afraid to wade into deep waters, whether it's masculinity, theology, or the occasional foam sword fight with his kids. Joe Rigney is a pastor, professor, and author of several books, including Live Like a Narnian, Strangely Bright, and The Things of Earth. He's taught theology, helped lead churches, and stirred more than a few conversations around Christian manhood, gender, and cultural faithfulness. He's got one foot in the Reformed tradition and one foot in the cultural firestorm, and apparently both hands full raising three boys. Welcome, Pastor Joe Rigney. Will you open us up in prayer, brother?
Glad to do it. Yep. Father, we're grateful for your goodness and kindness. We pray that you bless this conversation and it would be helpful to others. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother. Do you think masculinity, we're going to start off talking about that specific topic, masculinity in our culture today. You've written a few really good books on that. Do you think in our current state that masculinity is in crisis?
Yeah, I mean, nationally, culturally, it certainly is. We basically, to put it crassly, we're a nation of bastards. That's how my colleague Jared Longshore always talks about that. Is that quite literally in terms of the rise of fatherlessness in the country, but even in places where you actually have a physical father present in some measure, fatherhood and manhood are somewhat of a mystery. They've been pathologized by the wider culture and treated as inherently toxic. And even in the church, I think there's been some confusion about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a good man, and how those might not be the same or the different, and how those things go together. So I do think, unlike some people have said, why do we need teaching about masculinity? And it's like, well, in a confused age, you can't assume things that a healthy culture would not need to devote intentional time
Right.
to these kinds of questions. It would just sort of happen as men pursued God and pursued their purposes. It would sort of come along with it. That's the way I think it operated for lots of history. But in a very confused sexual culture,
Mhm.
it requires more intentionality.
How do you think that the culture, if they were just to define masculinity, you said there's a lot of talk around it, and people are like, "Why do we need more conversation on masculinity?" Where's the big divide between what culture would say masculinity is and what we should say it is biblically?
Yeah, so I think part of the cultural confusion is, on the one hand, there's a commitment to an egalitarian or feminist ideology that kind of has been fairly successful at propagandizing people into thinking that men and women are more or less interchangeable. But because they're not, those differences inevitably show up. Nature's stubborn, and so when they do, um, masculine, the male forms of sociality, the ways that men relate to one another, the way that they relate to the world around them, are treated as toxic and my favorite woke word, problematic. Um, which basically means they're not boys and men are not institution friendly. Um, they're institution builders, but they're
Mm,
not always institution friendly. And so because of that, there's usually an effort. You can see this even Christian schools struggle with this. The girls are really good at sitting in class all day and doing what
right.
they're told, and they're agreeable and want to please the teacher. And at least some of the boys are not going to be, and that's viewed as a problem. It's viewed as something that needs to be fixed, usually with large amounts of medication.
Mm,
And so we just kind of numb the man right out of them, or get them shunt them off into the corner, rather than seeing masculinity, that incipient masculinity, as something to be cultivated, encouraged, and oriented towards glory and honor and goodness, and wanting to cultivate ambition and turn them loose on a world that needs them to stand up straight and build things. And instead, we kind of squash it. And culturally, it's viewed male aggression, male the way that men joke with each other, the way that the kind of bonding that men engage in is viewed
Right.
as something that women can't do or can't do as well, and is
Mhm.
therefore kind of exclusionary. So it creates really gnarly dynamics in churches, schools, businesses, institutions, society as a whole.
How are you all working on how in your schools? You have a classical school, Lagos, out in Moscow. How do you specifically address being able to cultivate that for those young men in a healthy way that they embrace what God made them to do versus having it snuffed out because people say that's poor behavior or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I think recognizing that when a young boy kind of rebels at some level, or bows up or presses back on authority figures, viewing that not merely as sin, pure and simple. There might be
Mhm.
sin in it because he's a sinner,
Right.
but also as something that you want to encourage. So hey, if you want to press back against authorities, let me show you how to do that.
Mm.
There's a way to do that that's righteous, that tests boundaries, that says, well, how come and why and what about that? And I think, so a couple of things, having male teachers, I think, is actually a really important element to this. Um, so, in the basically, if you have ladies doing all the teaching, say in your high school,
Right.
um, then men are going to bow up against that and feel and women are going to feel that as a challenge in a different
Mhm.
kind of way, and try to kind of mom that in a way that may not be actually helpful. And so to have principals, administrators, teachers, coaches, who say, "Hey, I see that, and now I want to direct it. I want to channel that masculine energy and ambition, and boundary pushing in good ways." The other thing, we have a pretty robust, the last 5 or 6 years have built a pretty robust football program
Mhm.
that's
That's
designed
good.
to kind of like awaken
Mhm.
and cultivate masculine virtue, and especially corporate masculine virtue, like how do men relate to each other, having a male
Right.
space where men can operate, and so the young men can grow and learn to sacrifice, learn to lay themselves down, cultivate things like honor and courage and strength and mastery, which are sort of manly virtues.
Mhm.
Uh, and to then do so with a view to, hey, this isn't just about football. We love football; it's great, but we're trying to actually prepare you to be Christians in the world.
Do you all have, you have football. Are there a multiplicity of sports at the school, or is it
Yeah,
primarily football?
historically, we've had, cross country, track, and basketball
Mhm.
have been the kind of historic ones, and then about 5, I think part of actually the reason that our head coach, established the football program here was recognizing that we had a lot of really smart kids,
Right.
who were athletic in the sense that they could run fast,
Uh-huh.
but that were kinda soft.
Mm.
And so, raising a bunch of bookworms and needing to cultivate some different kind of
Right.
masculine virtue in them, and that football, would be a good means of accomplishing that purpose.
Right.
And it's been really remarkable, even my short time here of 3 years or
Mhm.
2 years plus. This is my 3rd season coaching, and, I think something like 75% of the male population of the high school is on the football team.
Wow.
So it's, and we play school, so we're a very small school, 150, or so, um,
That's the high school,
the high school, the 150 or so in the high school, and so we're playing other schools that have, a similar kind of size, but they have, 12 to 20 guys on their football team, and we have 50.
right. Um, one the reason I asked about other sports that you all have is because, I grew up wrestling, and wrestling taught me in many ways that no book could, how to be a man and handle adversity and
Right.
how to get slammed and get back up, how to be put on your back in front of 1,000 people by another man
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
know that, "Oh my gosh, they're all watching me not be able to get up right now."
Right.
So sports I think are huge, but one area we in culture, we've given it over to, the secular system, and then they turn it into an idol and also make the most popular day for sports on the Lord's Day.
Right.
And so that's the negative side of that. So I thought it was really cool when I listened to, I think you guys had an episode on something where you talked about this, and you covered how sports were a way that you were trying to help to shape and decide. Oh, it was Future Men. I think it was something on that documentary, and then in the
Yeah.
book. And so I totally agree there. And my heart was like, yeah, but I wish all of our sports weren't
Yeah.
centered in our area on basically becoming an idol and ruining the Lord's Day for.
100%. Yeah. So in a Christian republic, we'd find a different day to do all of our football, and it would be reorganized differently, which makes it hard. And you got to navigate that, and keep the we in our context try to keep the tail from wagging the dog. So the sports is a co-curricular kind of thing. We want to. There are certain things you learn better in that kind of context, but we don't want it to overshadow the academics and the spiritual formation, but kind of work in tandem. But it does get at, when we thought about it, it is the difference between trying to help. There's a difference between good at being a man and being a good man.
Mhm.
And I think this is a place where there's been a lot of confusion among Christians by only focusing on conservative Christians. Let's be a good man. And it's like, well, some of these guys need to learn how to be good at being a man.
Mhm.
And there's different virtues that kind of operate there. So we've tried to really lean into, hey, let's make sure we're encouraging these young men to be good at being a man, and then also be good men.
Right. What would you say the primary, so being at being a man would be just orthopraxy, and then the other would be more of a philosophical.
No, they're both in terms of behavior or conduct or lifestyle, but it would be something like so masculine virtues, like what makes you good at being a man, um, on courage,
Mhm.
strength, physical strength, mental strength, just power, and then skillfulness or excellence, mastery of certain things. And so that could be so those three basically get you honor in a male group. So if you excel at some or all of those, if you can use power in ways and not be overpowered by others, if you have technical skills, so if you may be a small guy, but you know how to do something that nobody else knows how to do, you're a
Right.
valuable member of the team. And then if you have courage, if you'll do it when it's hard, when it's painful, in the face of opposition, that gets you respect and honor in a male group. Those are sort of masculine virtues, but it
Mhm.
doesn't tell you whether or not those virtues are being ordered to good and higher ends.
Mhm.
So a gang actually cultivates all of those, right? Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Gotcha.
I'm good at yeah, I have skillfulness. I know how to pick a lock and rob someone. I can beat up somebody, and I'll do it even though the cops are around the corner. You have those that's manual. That's masculinity. That's manliness, and it will get you respect among the gang, but it's also evil. And so it's those virtues which kind of, but you also have to have it on a football team or in a missionary group, right? The same sorts of virtues would show up there, those masculine virtues. And then it's the higher virtues, or the sort of more spiritual, philosophical virtues like sacrifice, love for God, love for
Mhm.
neighbor, humility, meekness, those sort of things then help to channel and direct the masculine virtues in productive ways that build up rather than tear down, or build up the right things and tear down the wrong thing or the right things.
I was thinking about this on the way over here. We left a pastor's meeting, and something you just said about the way that guys talk to each other stood out, even about the pastor's meeting. Like, we were just goofing off, messing with each other because
Yeah.
AI made a photo of our staff, and we all looked like, I looked fat and short, and
Yeah.
it was just funny because we were all picking on each other, and to think of what that would look like if it was a group of women would be completely different.
Or a
Uh,
mixed group. I think that's one of the things is like mixed groups tend to adopt, especially in civilizations, tend to adopt feminine norms. Men restrain themselves out of kind of honor for women. We don't let the sort of the masculine energy go because it is uncomfortable for women, and so both female groups and mixed group tend to gravitate toward female social norms, which is why
mm,
male only spaces actually do matter. And it's interesting. I had this observation back when we planted our church in Minnesota, that it seemed to me that there were two places I discovered where masculine camaraderie was welcome in modern society, and it was youth sports and church planting.
huh.
And
Never been a part.
and I was involved in both. I was coaching my boys and
Yeah,
realizing that all of these secular guys, nominal, some of them were nominal Christians, some of them were Christians at all, but the amount of effort and emphasis they placed on the youth sports. And I was like, I think this is because they live most of their lives in a feminized context, right? Governed by
yeah,
HR departments, where they can't just be men training other men or engaging and building something as men. And so then all of a sudden, what you mentioned about making the idol out of it, I think that the reason that sports actually has that prominence in our society, um, in a lot of ways, is because it's one of the few places that where it's permissible to allow masculine virtues to just run, and that they're largely male dominated still, like the norms
right.
that govern them. Now you have places where it's like everybody gets a participation trophy and all that kind of stupid,
Mhm.
but we can still make fun of it. Um,
Yeah,
and so, because normal society isn't that way, like if you have a company, for example, and it's largely men, you could be slapped with a lawsuit,
yeah,
right, for not hiring enough women. Where are the places that you're allowed to do that to kind of prioritize masculine norms and and largely masculine spaces? And it's like, well, church planning, at least in conservative circles. So I noticed a parallel when I was planning a church and coaching a team that I was like, hey, the same sorts of things are happening here at the kind of natural level. We can push on each other. We can orient to each other without having in a male only context with that kind of banter that you're mentioning, which for
right.
men is actually a really important thing because it's a way that I determine whether you're reliable. Like, can you
Mhm.
take a punch rhetorically? If I make fun of you, do you buckle and wilt? Do you get defensive? Um, that's I'm learning something. If I make fun of you and then you take it and then you're able to return it, I can go, that guy's not gonna he's not gonna buckle in a fight.
Right. I used
If I slap you with my words and make
and
fun of
then
you
yeah, you
and then you
crumble.
wilt, then all of a sudden, or if you get defensive and kind of get mad and angry, I go, okay, in if it when everything goes belly up, I don't know what you're gonna do.
That would be that's a good segue. So I had some questions in between this, but that's a good segue into a conversation I had with someone recently. This was a woman. I just spoke with her on the phone because I do this. So what I'm trying to do here is something that's very similar to Sean DeMars. You've been on Room for Nuance, or even I think I said that in the reach out, Pints with Aquinas, but a good Protestant conservative version of that. And I recently spoke with someone that I wanted to interview. Um, and I'm not going to say her name because there's no point in that, but they had a grievance against the way that your crew markets.
Yeah,
Their example was that they knew when like their actual exact example was the book The Sin of Empathy,
yeah,
and they knew like when that book came out, it would ruffle feathers and that it would have been better if it was titled something like The Forgotten Sin of Empathy or something like that
yeah.
because empathy has its goods, has its bads. What do you say to people uh basically what I'm getting at is it sounded like what you were saying there was the reason we do that is because it's going to help show who's going to buckle under a little word and who's
Mhm.
actually going to read the book and
Right,
withstand through that. And that's who you wrote it for, was the person who's not going to just be like, oh no, sin of empathy and throw it away.
right. Yeah, so, yeah, part of the reason that that book's titled the way it is, initially, it was just I thought it was kinda clever whenever we did the first interview back in 2018 or 2019.
Mhm.
I thought, "Oh, that's kinda provocative, that'll be fun." And then people made it a much bigger deal. And so then that was like, "Oh, I need to lean into this."
Yeah.
I'll do the clarity, so I'm gonna say the provocative thing, and then
Mhm.
I'm willing to make all of the qualifications and do the nuance and stuff like that, when pressed. If people are confused, I love to bring clarity.
Hey,
Um
you like the word complex though. You can't, right? Not nuance.
Yeah, I like clarity. I like clarity,
Clarity,
not
right?
nuance. Yeah, I like clarity, not nuance
That's what it
because,
was.
yeah, in the same way I like compassion, not empathy. It's the same basic issue because I think one gets me everything and one only gets me part of it and loses other
Mhm.
stuff. But I am trying to the provocative thing, I'm provoking thought and I'm provoking a reaction. Like the reaction because the reaction from some provokes thought in others. People go, "Oh, wait, that's what he's talking about."
Mhm.
Um, and so it's serving even the folks who light their hair on fire or still grumble about the title and I wish it was named something else and I'm like, "Great, you write that book then. If you think there's a better way to say it." Like, I'm grateful Ali Bestucky wrote a book called Toxic Empathy. I think
Yeah, she
Great.
did.
Good
Yeah.
good for her. Great. It's an awesome title. It's interesting though, that's more palatable because it leans into kind of the
The
therapeutic,
toxic masculinity
the
type thing.
toxic masculine. Things can be toxic.
Mhm.
Sin is a moral word, and part of what the provocative thing of the title, I think I've discovered is it brings together kind of a classic moral framework with words like sin, and then this modern therapeutic framework in which empathy is prominent. And it's like they jar. They don't sound like they belong together. Whereas toxic empathy,
Yeah.
even though the substance of that book's fantastic, Ali Beth did a great job.
Sure.
Um, the title still makes sense to people in the therapeutic context. It's probably why hers is also sold a lot more than mine. I'm guessing is it is it
Really? I
yeah,
was
oh
gonna
yeah.
ask
So,
that.
well, it's also a
Yeah.
much bigger publisher
Uh-huh.
and it's done numbers, which is great though. I'm like, go team go. Let's just
Yeah.
all make sure we're guarding against this particular danger.
And that's what she does too. Like, she's got a really big platform where hundreds of thousands of people are it's her primary focus. You're focused in a multiplicity of things, so it makes sense. I mean, just in her saying it on her show is gonna get, a ton of traffic just from that. You've been influenced by both Pastor John Piper and Pastor Doug Wilson. How have they shaped your thinking around things like masculinity?
Yeah. So I think part of actually Piper's appeal to me when I was in college, so it was 2001 to 2005, was that he was accenting, or he was speaking in a masculine key. He was speaking, and he talked this way. I'm
Mhm.
speaking as a father to, sons and daughters in their, he's a boomer, we're millennials. And he was speaking in a very fatherly way and trying to cast vision. He says, there's a great calling and a mission out there that God has made you for, to know him, to glorify him, to be satisfied in him, and to go to the
Right.
nations and all these things. And it was a very motivating, like it basically was awakening masculine ambition and then directing it towards really big things.
Mhm.
I think that's one way that I mean, just the way that he preached, I think did that,
Right.
especially to young men.
Mhm.
And so I really appreciated, that aspect of his, just how he preached, and I think it resonated with a generation because of that. I think, you asked about Doug too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so then I think the thing that I've picked up from Doug, is sober-mindedness and joviality. So at base, like a big the main kind of like dispositional difference between John and Doug is John is always earnest and Doug is always jovial.
What is,
And
if you were to define that, jovial versus earnest?
yeah, earnestness is a kind of urgency about whatever it is you're saying, whatever truth you're trying to say or communicate. There's an urgency to it that has a kind of edge.
Yeah, I get that. And
So like and even the language, we exist to spread a passion. Like that idea of
mhm,
passion brings a kind of urgency to it.
yeah.
Whereas Doug's joviality tends to be a much more, there's a stability in it. And
Mm.
I'm not trying to say that John's not stable or something, but I'm
No,
saying
no,
like
I get what you're saying.
there's
Yeah.
a steadiness and a kind of lightheartedness
Mhm.
that lives in sort of like whatever the Moscow mood is, like that's a major part of it. And I
Yeah.
think Doug really taught me that. So when I think about, the classic quote that I use from Lewis all the time about masculinity is from, uh, Horse and His Boy, Narnian Chronicles. This is what it means to be a king, to be first in every desperate attack, last in every desperate retreat. And when there's hunger in the land, to wear finer clothes and laugh louder at a scantier meal. So
Yeah.
first in, last out, laughing loudest. And I think I've learned that from Doug. So there is real sacrifice, but it's the kind of sacrifice that you look like you're enjoying yourself. It looks like fun.
Correct.
Um, and so I think I think that's a really important part of masculinity as well. Dads should be fun zone. Dads should be, fun dad, play dad,
Mhm.
rough and tumble wrestle dad. All of those things, um, are really important in cultivating both men and sons and daughters.
Right.
And I think I learned that kind of sober-mindedness and playfulness, joviality from Doug, even as I appreciate the urgency, earnestness, passion of a Piper.
Sure. I think that, those 2 different approaches, I don't know if you really call it an approach, but at least, aspect of their personality
Yeah.
they both speak to different people, and Pastor Johns is going to speak more to this broader audience because he's like everybody's gateway drug, like into
Right.
reformed anything. And so he's sparking that passion in people. And then Doug is the type of, I mean, his productivity
Yeah.
is the type of person that, like the ox, continues to just move forward and smile through it and take the arrows. And the combination of the two has been great for a generation of people,
Right.
in my opinion. Was that one of the things that, so you were the president of Bethlehem, right?
Correct.
It was that one of the things that, like, long term, you saw what was going on in Moscow, and you were like, that is more my approach to things, one of the things that drew you there?
Um, Certainly was. I think the other element was whereas you and I may think, hey, both of these are really this is a really good combination. Like if you mix these two flavors together, that's really cool. Which is how I operated for 15 or so years when I was at
Mhm.
Bethlehem. There was that magic window of time when there was lots of traffic and everybody was friends, and
Yeah, now they're not.
and I was, just blessed. God was kind to me, and I'm all of a sudden sitting on these stages with my two heroes, going like, "So you do it this way, and you do it that way. Like, let's talk about that. Like, why? Let's." And I just loved it. And books like The Things of Earth came out of that. The Shared Love of Lewis, things like
Mhm.
that. But over time, I think that kind of the Bethlehem ethos saw itself as there's a little bit of oil and water with the
Uh-huh.
Moscow mood. And that was one of the things that eventually, so whereas I thought they could be fruitfully and usefully combined and were both good, others really started to regard them as troublesome, or like that the Moscow stuff was not like long term. The fear of that side was this will be harmful and destructive. This will
Uh-huh.
the Moscow mood, the serrated edge,
Mm.
the provocative language, the swashbuckling videos, all of that will not be a good influence on Christian formation. And so basically, then what I saw was, well, I there's an allergy to Moscow among some that I don't
Mhm.
have,
Yeah, yeah.
and therefore to lead an institution in which that allergy needs to be operative, like that I need to there's aversions that I don't share, but I need to govern according to them, that wasn't gonna work well. And so,
Mhm.
whereas here, in Moscow, I can, praise John Piper up and down, left and right for the things they're good about him, and differ with him in whatever ways too, but,
Sure.
uh, there's
But it's
there's
not
no
so
allergy,
polarizing.
there's no Bethlehem allergy here. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, go team go. So I think and I think that's actually true of a lot of places. It's funny to me. I was even, I had a conversation with a group overseas,
Uh-huh.
another cultural context,
Sure.
um, but had been influenced by the reformed world here, and it was surprising to me, honestly, how some of those divisions and allergies from America had been
Uh-huh.
exported. So I was talking to a guy who really liked all of it. Like he was like that culture's version of me and you, where he was like, I
Sure.
like this guy and I like that. I learned this from him and him from, and he loved it. But there were others who had only been influenced by certain streams of evangelicalism
Yeah.
who were doing the don't listen to Moscow, don't get into that, don't do Canon Plus, don't do any of that. That's bad.
Mm.
And it wasn't because the groups in country had bad experiences. They were simply channeling what people in the States were saying about us.
Yeah.
But it was basically we're exporting that allergy.
From
So
thousands of miles away.
thousands of
Yeah.
miles away, saying this is bad, this will lead to bad things. And I just thought that was like a wow, okay, so even it follows us there, even though Together for the Gospel here, we're just trying to bring the gospel to an unreached people group. And it's like, no, we're still gonna bring those same allergies.
Do you think so? I'm a particular Baptist, and I hear and feel what you're saying. And do you think with the trajectory of Christendom that we could fix that gap that's because I want it to be terribly, and I know people like even Tilly and Abigail
Yeah.
Dodds, like, they would love to see those types of people, Keith Foskey, like, all these people would love to see more of a bridge than they would the divide. But now the people who control media for the most part that would be considered more in our direction, Baptist is what I mean by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they're going further away, and it seems that X is one of the worst places in the world. I can't stand being on there even though I have to be for my job. And so when I get on there, it just seems more and more polarizing, and
Yeah.
I'm 27, so I wanna shape something or be a part of shaping something by the grace of God that combines these 2 groups that could be so much better together than they ever are when they're ripping each other apart. Do you see that as, something that would have to be miraculous, or how do you feel
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think there's a generational component. I'm curious to see how generational turnover affects that, and kind of the changing wider cultural context. If we're living in kind of a new era of at least openness in some places to the gospel, some surprising ones, sort of post assassination of Charlie Kirk, these sort of things.
Right.
Um, does the opportunities for ministry break down some of those walls that had really kind of gone up over the last, say, 10 or 15 years? I
Mm,
think that's possible, and I think there is a generational thing. I wonder if next gen folks will have the same kind of allergies or see it as don't go there, don't talk to that guy, don't platform him.
right.
Whether the same, not, there may be other divisions that arise that kind of surprise us, but
Mhm.
I think part of what um, there's a common cultural posture I think that can happen between that can cross those denominational differences. So a Baptist and a Presbyterian,
Mhm.
those kind of divisions, kind of in this context, they're fun to debate. We can mess with each other, do that kind of stuff, but
Right.
they don't produce the same kind of division. But what does produce a kind of acrimonious division is different cultural posture.
Right.
Is like, how are you orienting to the world outside?
Mhm.
What's your ministry philosophy? And then I think there's even within there's kind of differences. And the Bible has this. So when Paul is going to go to the Gentiles and Peter's going to go to the Jews, there that's going to require different mission strategies. But can
Right.
you extend the right hand of fellowship and be like, all right, good luck. Do your thing your way to reach those people. We're going to do our thing our way to reach those people. But we're on the same team. We're
Yeah.
just operating in different parts of the wall. And I think that's all to the good. That's how I think about. Well, I look at other ministries and that do things differently than we do, and I go, good for them. Glad they're doing it. And then there's a different thing where people go, no, this isn't just they moralize those differences. Like this is
Yes.
actually
Yeah.
unfaithfulness. This is destructive and harmful, and therefore it's not enough to say it's different. We have to actually kind of blackball it, warn people, back channel pressure to keep people from talking to people, things like that. And it's that
Right.
sort of thing that I go, as long as that's there, it will be really hard to work together because
Mhm.
there's an
Absolutely.
embargo.
Man, you're seeing that right now with, there's the Shepherds Conference is getting a lot of flack because they're platforming Dever, Piper, Lig, and Moeller,
Yeah,
and I'm like, where is this coming from? And these are Baptists, like, that are like, "These
yeah,
guys are too liberal to be speaking at this," and
right,
they're trying to silence them, and I'm like, "This is insane." That's what I mean when I say I can't stand X, is because every
sure,
day I get on there, there's a picture of one of those guys and these people that are trying to deplatform them, and I'm like, "This is the very thing that you probably would have fought against 10 years ago."
yeah,
And you can disagree with the guys on some of the positions they take, but what you said, I always hear the Nine Marks crew saying this as well, is we're going to do what we're doing and what our conviction, what the Lord convicts us to do, and we're going to cheer the other guys on. And I see that a lot out of them. I'm not I walk in many different circles, so I listen to a lot of different people that are from the Reformed tradition talk about different things. So I don't know, maybe they do talk smack on other camps, but I haven't seen it. And most of what I've seen from them is let's cheer them on while we're doing our thing here, and I really appreciate that. As long as the gospel's there, and as
yeah.
long as they're trying to advance that.
Yeah, I think some of the I don't know, call it concern or the why would shepherds invite those guys? Obviously, it was because they were friends of John MacArthur, and there's a generational thing happening there.
Uh-huh.
But it's also a sense of like these guys whiffed on some ways during kind of wokeness and COVID.
Yeah, like
Um,
vaccines and stuff like that.
yeah, and that there's an element of like, and that was, I think for some folks, it's like that was never acknowledged as like, yeah, we missed that, or yeah, that wasn't the way to handle it. Whereas I know guys that made some mistakes. A good friend of mine, Andrew Walker, wrote an essay during COVID where he was really pushing people to get the vax, and then about a year later realized that was bad. He was actually trying to bind consciences or put pressure on consciences that he should not have done, and he just publicly acknowledged that I was wrong. That was it. And I just think like that's a really good thing. Like, hey, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I thought this, and then now on reflection, I realized that wasn't the way to do it. And I think his credibility as a leader goes up because he's willing to do that. Whereas when folks double down or defend, then it makes people go, "Well, I don't know if we can. Have we learned the lesson? Are we going to make that same mistake again?" So I think
Mhm.
that's where you see some of the hostility or concern about who's getting platformed where.
Yeah.
And I think the other element that has been just part of my experience over 20 years of like you kind of like wanting everybody that's we all have big God theology. We may do things different ways, but can we all be friends and kind of pull in the same direction? Like worked at that for decades at Bethlehem and now here. And I think part of the difference is the way this it actually gets at the masculinity um, question.
Mhm.
There's a certain kind of open conflict and then there's a certain kind of sublimated backroom conflict
Mhm.
that are very different. And one of them tends to be more masculine. Like when if a guy like if you have sons and you're at a dinner table and the sons are upset with each other, you're going to know about it. The conflict's going to be on the table.
Right.
Um, if you have daughters and they're having trouble with each other, you're not going to know it because it's going to be under the table.
Mm.
Okay, so male conflict tends to be open and overt. You think this, or like you think about debates like if how do men work through things. It's like, well, Smith thinks his idea is better than Jones, let's have a debate and let him hash it out, right?
Mhm.
Or wrestling, things like that, like who can pin the other guy, and it's public and that's the stakes. Feminine conflict tends to be sublimated, behind the scenes, subtle, done with a smile on the face, but that knife's coming in the back. And I think there's ways that different ministries kind of operate in different ways. The criticism is less public and is more behind the scenes pressure, where it's not a let's hash the ideas out in public or let's debate that. It's instead let's not platform him in private, right? Just
Yeah.
let's rescind that invitation, or like you got invited there and you said yes. Moscow's had this for years, where we'll invite somebody,
They
they'll
don't
say
show up.
yes, and then a week and a half later they say back, oh, actually I can't make it, and it's clear they got the treatment. Um, and that's a funnier kind of it's a different way of policing basically.
Mhm.
But it's a less obvious one.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely I think that the heart I have in all of it, like this is a very practical thing, is that most people, because of where the Overton window is right now, get most of their information, unfortunately, from a 30-second clip or from Twitter or, one of those different sources. And then when like we're currently working on revitalization, and a lot of the books we want to give out are good 9 marks books.
Mhm.
And then now the people we give them to, if they go and just Google a name or go on Twitter, they're thinking, "Is our church going liberal?" Because of someone that I would still never consider liberal, and we're trying to give a good resource to them, though I would disagree with some things, of
Yeah,
course.
sure.
And so that's where it can get, difficult with media, and I'm just like, I don't know that the discernment bloggers, maybe they do realize that's what they're doing, but it does make it a lot harder in the local church to be able to even give out resources, so that's just been a frustration of mine.
Same.
Um, one question I was gonna ask you, you're a history guy, unless did you wanna speak any more to that
No,
before we
that's great.
you're a history guy, how did feminism take such a strong hold in our society and more specifically in the church?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the different waves of it, but it was basically feminism was an assault on on God and the created order,
Mm,
that tried to um, upend or level down all of the distinctions God's built into the world. And so it treated all of the sort of naturally given um, hierarchies as inherently evil, as opposed to things that are capable of corruption, capable of being, abused, but in themselves good.
Sure.
And I think, uh, so, there was a great article the other day by Helen Andrews called "The Great Feminization,"
Mm.
in which she like her basic thesis, which is similar to one that Sin of Empathy has a chapter called "Feminism, Queen of the Woke." But she basically realized that what we call wokeness is basically feminization. It's the result of feminization. When you have
Mm.
basically it's our historically public institutions were male dominated, which means the norms that govern them were male norms.
Mhm.
So universities were established by men, and they were so it was debate ideas, discuss them, discuss, like let's fight about it,
Right.
openly and publicly. Militaries, politics, all of those things were governed by male norms. And then when women entered, it was the first women were usually atypical women. They were women who, maybe didn't like to do what the typical woman likes to do. They liked the debate, but they were basically willing to operate according to male norms.
Sure.
What happened then is at some point there's a tipping point where the just the number of women in a given organization means that the
Mm.
norms shift. And now you get feminine modes of conflict, which
Mhm.
are appeal to authority, to cancel somebody, get them to stop talking that way. It's again under the table, sublimated. It's more emotionally oriented because it's about agreeableness and is everybody getting along. And so the worst thing you could do is say something that would make somebody offended. And so basically, the cancel culture dynamic of wokeness was the result of this kind of feminization of major institutions, universities, public square, militaries, things like that.
So
And
basically,
I think it's absolutely a right thing. And it's basically a reassertion that men and women are different. And it's not that one form of conflict is inherently better or
mhm.
worse. It's that they're designed to do different things.
Right. So
And
different groups of types of people.
exactly, in different spheres of life. Um, and so male conflict is designed for certain activities and it serves those activities well. Female conflict is designed for different activities and it serves those well. But it's when you mix them that what's a strength in one place will be a liability in another. Okay.
Sure.
And it's sort of like male aggression in a schoolroom. If you're trying to learn and the boys are just bouncing off the walls, nobody's learning. Well, it's like
Right.
that. But do you want male aggression? Do you want male intensity and energy to be able to build something? Yes, that's what that strength is
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. I used to
It's
be a
good.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's good in its place. It's not good out of its place. Similarly, say feminine empathy for hurting people is fantastic and a great blessing in its place.
Uh-huh.
But when it comes to say guarding the doctrine of the church, feminine empathy is a liability. It's a major
Yeah.
liability
Yeah.
because all the false teacher has to do is present himself or herself as a victim. And all of a sudden, female empathy kicks in, and they welcome things in that they ought to keep out, which
Right.
is why you had the slide, like the progression, the downgrade of denominations. They ordain women, and then 5 minutes later, they're sanctioning sodomy and ordaining homosexuals, and gay marriage is all fine. And it's like, why is that? It's like, well, because they're victims, and now empathy is guiding rather than truth, rather than doctrine. And so those dynamics that I think I mean, we have to be more honest and realistic that men and women operate differently, and they're designed to complement one another. But that means respecting and acknowledging and leaning into those differences and not trying to smother them.
I like that, the leaning in. That's a good way to picture it. Just because oftentimes we might get right up to that we might get right up to the line of stepping into being healthy, and I feel like so many pastors, um, are too afraid to actually lean into it in their preaching. They'll get right up to it, and they're just so close, and you'll be sitting there and you're like, "Yes, do it." Step over the line, and then they kinda lean back instead of leaning into it, and it was like, well, there was no effect there. That wasn't effective because all you did was got right up to it and then made everybody feel good, like,
Yeah.
right after getting right up to it. Do you prefer the term complementarianism or patriarchy?
I would use the term patriarchy to describe what I am. But I also the guys who are very much broad or thick complementarians. I think that that's just it's a terminological difference.
Mm.
And so substantively, I think that there's a lot of the same. The Bible's commands are rooted in our nature as human beings and rooted in creation, and not simply a thin layer of Bible verses over egalitarian nature, which is what some
Mm.
thin complementarians can operate that way. These are like
Oh, yeah.
special little rules and
Yeah.
isolated places in exceptional circumstances, which is basically just a way of giving. It's a way of giving in slowly.
Yeah, it is. I agree with that. I don't really know. So the way that you would piece the two words apart or separate them is the patriarchy is going to be like more hardline and complementarianism leaves enough room to be able to get softer and softer until it's basically egalitarianism.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the term complementarianism as a term, this is why Piper came up with it, was a way of trying to do a third way between egalitarianism and patriarchy. Like it
That's a
was,
trigger word right now.
yeah, I know it is.
Good.
But like that's admitted, like that's what they said is that patriarchy has these
Sure.
connotations,
Yeah.
and we know substantively we're not egalitarians, but we don't want to be called patriarchalist. We don't want to be
Mhm.
called that because it has bad connotations. And so it was a branding strategy. And so let's invent a new word, based in kind of God made a helper fit for him. So that idea of fitness or complementing each other was where the word came from. And let's invent an ism to do it. And I think I get why, but it was designed at some level, it was designed as a kind of rearguard action in the face of feminist encroachment in the church. Like it arose because can ladies be pastors? And
Yeah.
who leads in the home? So it was very narrow in its scope, even though there were people who were a part of it that had a broader view, Piper among them, who thought, no, our differences do matter in other places. But as a movement, it was driven by home and church, which meant that then the camp was broader and you had people who had different kind of anthropological foundations who were agreed that were not egalitarian, but did not agree on why.
Mhm.
And so I think over the last 15 years, that fault line has emerged among the comp. That's why you have the soft or the thin version and then the harder or thicker or broader versions of complementarianism. People who both say we're complementarian, but it's different.
Sure.
And I think that it's because over time, um, the patriarchy folks are basically those who say we're not worried about branding. We're not like that's not trying to thread needles between these two camps is not what we're interested in. We're just going to assert it, and so I think it's a branding thing.
How does fighting feminism look practically in the local church? Say you're in an area where these things just aren't being spoken of, and I'm talking about my area. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
asking this.
Okay.
But where these things aren't being spoken of, like we're talking about doing a conference for the church conference where we get some people out here to talk about things, and we're currently working on revitalization. And so, um, practically, how does that look when you're in the beginning phases of trying to lead the sheep to water
Yeah.
and realize, hey, you've been impacted by this sin as well that's in our culture?
Yeah. So, man, there's a couple of different things. One would be sort of the Pauline, be fully convinced in your own mind. I think part of the reason that these issues become fraught is because even those who advocate for them feel nervous about them.
Mm.
And so, because you're basically flinching because you're anticipating a negative reaction. And I think there's a way, this is part of why the patriarchy thing actually matters. So if what I mean by patriarchy is something like God made a patriarchal world, men just are the head of the home. God designed them that way. And then by extension, male headship is sort of normative and typical in other areas of society, required in the church and typical in society. If that's just an is statement, and then all of the oughts, how should you do that? Well, just be sacrificed and love and that sort of thing, flow from those indicative statements. If that's what patriarchy is, um, then you ought to really believe that. You ought to believe that like God made it this kind of world, and therefore this is good news. We're cutting with the grain of reality.
Mm.
So around here we talk about assuming the center. And that's what we mean is we mean rather than apologizing, yeah, so men are the head and we're sorry about that, ladies. We know you won't like that. Instead go like, hey, men are the head and this is really good news for you. Like this is actually going to relieve you. If you lean into this, you'll actually discover you're basically recognizing there is a feminine nature in there that actually is drawn to courage, strength, excellence and mastery, and honor. Like
Oh
Jordan
yeah.
Peterson has that art. He says um, girls like boys who win status competitions with other boys. Like that's what's actually attractive. And it's just that people have been catechized into smother that like that's actually what's attractive. And so when you're like, hey, do you want a man who stands up straight, leans in, has courage, takes initiative, and is willing to be a man, and then do so for the sake of Christ, for the good for good things, has those virtues as well.
Uh-huh.
It's is that attractive? And it's like it will be. Um, and so assuming the center is really important. And then the second thing I'd say in terms of initiating is learning to recognize your own hesitations on the issue and interrogating them and leaning into those. So I do this a lot when I talk to pastors about this issue is I'll
Right.
say, imagine for a second that you're going to preach a sermon on marriage and your elders have given you a choice of text. You can either preach husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church.
Yeah, I've
You're
heard
going to
you
preach
say
two messages. You're going to
yeah.
preach one on husbands and wives, or husbands love your wives, and then the other one is wives submit to your husbands, like Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord.
Yeah.
Which sermon are you excited to preach?
Yeah.
And invariably, in every circle I've ever been a part of, even in terms of conservative evangelicalism, I always get the laugh because everybody knows that the first sermon would be fun to preach. It'd be easy to preach. It'd be straightforward to preach. You'd preach it straight down the middle, love her like Jesus, man. And you would sacrifice, die, give yourself up. You would just go for it. And then the other one would be buried under acres of footnotes and qualifications. Well, it doesn't mean this, and it doesn't mean that, and it doesn't mean, and it doesn't mean. And the end of the sermon, everybody would know what it doesn't mean, and no one would have any idea what to do.
Mhm.
Like what wouldn't come out of there is any notion, hey, wives, you should orient to your husband as a lord.
Mm.
Like you don't have to, we don't do lords and ladies anymore. Like that's not how we
Right.
talk in America, but like orient to him that way. That's how you should orient to him. And it would like you would never get there. And that hesitation that we have about preaching Bible straight down the middle and applying it straight down the middle indicates our awareness of our context. We know that we're likely to
Mhm.
get pushback from women, and men don't like pushback from women. We don't like female agitation. It makes us uncomfortable. And so as leaders, as pastors, you have to recognize that impulse in you, and then you have to like overcome it. You have to say like, okay, that's just fear of man, or in this case, fear of
Mhm.
women, um, that's bubbling up, or fear of men who are going to try to kneecap you. Hey, Susie was really upset by what you said, and they're going to come, and you've got to go.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to get that. Is it true? Is it true? And if we
Mhm.
live according to the truth, will that be good? If we live by the truth, will it be good for us? And if you really believe that, then you'll say it anyway.
Yeah, amen. I had a, sermon so no mushy middle is what it's actually just have conviction and then live out that conviction and trust God to bless you doing that. Basically, if I could take everything you said in the practical application, it's have conviction and
Yeah.
actually know what you believe when you wake up in the morning. I think that's what they used to say. MacArthur,
Yeah.
when he woke up in the morning, we may have disagreed with him, but he looked in the mirror and he knew what he believed in. And so
That's
I
right.
can I can respect that. My second sermon I ever preached, I had something on something that was rebuking homosexuality, and a guy that worked with my, dad was he's not a member, but he visited the church often and came and listened to sermons, and, he hadn't been there for a few weeks, and I was like, "He's gonna show up right when I have to preach my second sermon," and I got up there, and I was like, "Yep, he's here."
Yeah. Right.
Went down and talked to dad, and he's like, "Well, the Bible's the Bible, so
Yeah.
you go up and you preach," and, that's
Yeah.
what we did.
That's right.
So, trust God to bless it. This question is from my wonderful wife. She asks, "What is the most helpful thing your wonderful wife does for you, acting as your helpmate as you serve as a pastor in your local church?"
I think, yeah, a couple of things. I think so. One is, she like when she sort of says, "Hey, you're like, even just you're doing a great job. I see all the things you're doing. I see all the things you're doing,
Mhm,
for our family, for the kingdom, and you're doing great at it." Right. That's a great like words of encouragement from her. I often don't care too much, what other people think, but if she thinks I'm doing a good job, then that's incredibly motivating.
Mm,
And it's a signal of the helpmate idea of like we're on a common mission together. This isn't just Joe doing something, but it's us doing something with Joe in the lead role. But she's like, no, I'm on this too. Like we're building something here,
mm,
and I'm doing my part. Um, I think that's a huge encouragement. I think obviously like for men, physical affection is a major deal, and so like sexual availability it does matter in these contexts. And so those are great encouragements of because it communicates like you're a man, and I admire you and desire you, and that's also a great boost and encouragement. And then the way that she engages with our boys, that um, uh, women, especially when it comes to their kids and the domestic sphere, are very observant.
mm.
She's often dialed into things that I may not be as dialed into at the granular level, right? I'm out in the world, and so her insightfulness and going like, I think that there's this thing going on with, say, one of our sons, or I think this might be an issue in their class at school, and she'll bring me those, and now it's like I have more information, I have wisdom, and then it's like, and she may have recommendations, thoughts that I think we need to address this. Um, and then I need to take that on board and take responsibility for it. So those are three ways: words of encouragement, physical affection, and then attentiveness to things that as a man I might not be as alert to, and then as a creature, there's just no way I can see it all. Those
Right.
are ways that my wife excels and does just yeah is fantastic.
Excellent 3. You all have the church plant in Washington, DC. That's only dude, why did I was mentioning all these places that are near me before we
Yeah.
got in the interview, and I'm like, "Your church isn't that far from here." So what was you were this was your brainchild, correct?
Yeah, I was me and another elder here. Kind of had the hey, what if we did this, and yeah, ran with it.
Was the thought process, 'cause I got to speak to Pastor Doug a little bit about this, was the thought process more he said your people were there, but how did you know your people were there? Were they reaching out to you? Did you have people that were just involved in the government, and so they moved out there?
Yeah.
How did you know?
Yeah, so some of it was we had people who moved there in the last 5 years or so for various being involved in different organizations, whether in the government or government adjacent. Um,
Mm,
and then there were others who were members of other CREC churches who were doing the same. So, oh, so and so's there now, or things like that. And so we knew that there was
mm,
already a constituency present, and that was struggling to find um, a like-minded church all the way down. So is there other Bible preaching churches? Sure. But when we're Presbyterian, we practice paedo communion. If you have kids, it's like no Capitol Hill Baptist is great, but your kids aren't going to get baptized and not going to take the Lord's Supper
yeah,
there.
yeah, it's a lot different.
So those kind of things really do matter, especially for families, and so that's part of what prompted it. And we also knew just from over the years that there were folks in DC who weren't necessarily a part of our church communion, but
Mm,
who were listening to Canon, reading Doug's blog, aware of what we were up to, and were attracted to it, but also didn't have the closest CREC church up until this was in Annapolis, Maryland, and then in West Virginia, and so it was like it's pretty
mm.
far to do those,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so that was kind of the impetus, and then it was the timing with there basically folks in the CRAC have said for years, man, we should at some point have a church in DC, but there was never a pastor. And so
Mm,
our kind of realization was, given the abundance of ministers here in Moscow, we got 5 or 6 churches. They have
mhm,
multiple pastors. It was like, hey, we actually probably could do something a little unusual. We know there's people there. What if we try to gather them before we have a minister and trust the Lord to provide the minister at the right time?
mhm,
And could we manage that from here? And we said, well, we could try. And so this is another thing about kind of the Moscow mood is, well, we'll try. Like Geronimo, amen. Let's take the shot, and if it works and God blesses it, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Um, and so that's kind of what led us to do it. Is this would be a good idea? I think we have the um, theological ministerial resources to pull it off. to give us a runway. And if God blesses it, we'll have a congregation, and then praying all along, Lord, provide the right guy who will be able to lead this group.
Do you have him yet?
We don't yet.
Hmm.
We've had some conversations with different folks, and hopefully those turn out. But at the present, it's we've got a long enough runway that we can do this for a year or two, as it is, and trusting that God will bring the right guy, a guy who has the same sort of theological vision, but also the same kind of cultural vision,
Sure.
who's not intimidated by DC, but also isn't enamored of it, right? He's not
Yeah.
the flashy lights,
Mhm.
has a little bit of Jonah in him. And so, that's the kind of, and ideally it's someone who's older, my age or older, so who's got grown kids, has some pastoral experience, not a newbie. So those are the kind of things, and it's like that's a pretty narrow deal. And who wants to move to Washington D.C., which is its own thing. So that's what we're looking for. But the Lord knows, and we trust Him to
Yeah.
provide.
Has he blessed all other spheres so far with it? Everything's gone smoothly and
Yeah, everything's gone really, really great. There's, we've brought into membership now, I think about 80 to 100 people,
Mm,
to kind of form the core. We just did that in the
praise
last 2
God.
weeks. And then we have about 150 or so, which basically fills the room that we're meeting in, 150 or so on a weekend. And I got a new space, hopefully, that we'll be moving into, in the same area, in the next couple months, as soon as it's finished being renovated. And so now that we've got the congregation, we're going to see what their giving capacity is. So that'll help us put together a financial package and,
Right.
for a minister at some point. So, so far, and they've been doing great. Really grateful. Every time we go out there, they're just grateful upon grateful, with the possibility of having a church like this that just so aligns. They're leaning in, being community for each other. It's been really, really sweet. And God, so basically, we planned this in February is when the idea came, and we launched in July.
Yeah.
And it's just like at every step, like the Lord provided, initial startup funds, and then the people gathered, and they've, covenanted together. They're now a body, and the ministers have been great, being willing to give up their time to go preach. It's just
Mhm.
like every step's along the way. And so we're real confident that God's going to provide the minister at the right time.
Praise God, man. There are definitely worse cities you could be in too. I mean, DC's, I mean, it's no walk in the park, but there's a lot of beauty just outside of it. I mean,
Yeah.
you can live 30 minutes from there,
Yeah.
like most people do from their churches
Right.
anyway,
Right.
and be in a beautiful area. And there are a lot of, as much as there are a lot of liberals there are also a lot of conservatives too. There, I mean, and I'm sure you've seen that with
Yeah.
the how God's blessed the church too. So, well, brother, that's all I've got, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on. I know your favorite month is probably coming up. You guys got No Quarter November pretty soon.
Me
Has the
too.
new trailer come out yet?
It has, and I think that they're working on it. So usually they kind of film that between, probably in the next couple. They're probably filming it right this week or next week. And
That's
I
how
don't
I
know what
was
it is. I have no idea what it is. I've heard little bits and pieces, but I always, it's fun. I get surprised too. It's great.
I was introduced to Pastor Doug by one of those. The year that he lit the Molotov cocktail and threw it in the boat.
Yeah.
That's how I was introduced to
Pop
him.
pop quiz. Do you know what the name of that boat was?
Oh, I can't remember.
It was the SS Empathy.
Oh, really?
It was.
That's awesome. Was it just written on the side?
Mhm.
I need to go back and watch it now. That
Yeah,
was
man, little Easter eggs like that. Those are like the little magic touches there. There's the SS Empathy that
they're
he.
so good, man. The, Canon our, business is a marketing company, and then
Yeah.
this is a ministry of the marketing company,
Okay.
and, we love a lot of the work that Canon does. They're good at their job, so,
Yeah, they are.
that's great. I'm looking forward to it. The person who actually introduced me to Doug via that ad is no longer likes him, but I like him more, so it was funny the way that it all worked
Yeah,
out.
yeah, right.
But yeah, man, this was awesome. I really appreciate you coming on, and
Yeah.
look forward praying for you guys in DC. Want to see everything flourish there, and as this thing continues to grow, maybe we'll contact you about a conference or something some point down the road too. Because like I said, we're trying to shape an area like you all started doing 50 years ago. So
Yeah, excellent. Great. Well, thanks for having me on.
yeah, brother, have a good one.